Welcome back. You're watching Gravitas with me, Rohit Gandhi. 37 historians at the University of Warwick in the UK recently published a statement voicing their concerns surrounding racism in Britain, particularly since the Brexit vote in June last year. As many of you may recall, during the British referendum to leave the European Union, there was an ugly anti-immigration tone to the pro-Brexit campaign. And after the Brexit vote, there was a spike in racist abuse. That's our focus for the next half hour. But before that, take a look at this report by WION's London Bureau Chief, Mandy Clark, which looks at racism post-Brexit.
The message during the referendum was clear. Immigration is Britain's biggest problem. And after the vote, there was a spike in racist abuse across the UK. A group of teens threatened to beat up a black man on a bus in Manchester, while others, like student Nalan Disanake, tried to make light of the situation. But anti-hate campaigner Jeff Arnold says Brexit hate crimes are no joke.
In the 2 weeks after Brexit, what we saw was a lot of the language actually changing and making specific references to the Leave campaign and to the actual result itself. We had a British Asian female who was targeted, along with the children that she had with her, targeted by a man who again made specific references to Brexit. You need to leave the effing country. He then spat at the victim.
Official figures of 31 police forces from across the UK show a rise of reported hate crimes of 41% after the Brexit vote. But that's not the true figure, because many victims of racial or religious abuse will choose never to report it. People on the streets of London say they don't support violence, but some do see immigration as an issue.
They're getting the wrong type in. I'm sorry, that is it, and I think they should stop it altogether now.
I think it's just a scare tactic, really, to say that it's immigration that is hurting our schools and our NHS and that kind of thing.
The Brexit vote has left the country divided, but many hope that tolerance will prevail. Mandy Clark, WION, London.
Let me go across to Mandy Clark, our London Bureau Chief, on this. Mandy, you live in London. Is racism, anti-immigrant sentiment visible today?
Absolutely. You did notice a sudden spike in people almost feeling that it justified racism, that it was okay to say certain things that were never okay to say in society, where, you know, you noticed, especially particularly ethnic minorities, people with visibly not British, and also the Polish community has been noticeably targeted. You see people openly having these conversations about the issue of immigrants in particular and immigration.
Mandy, I remember before the pre-Brexit debate, one of the challenges was the Eastern Europeans that had come across into England, and that was one of the biggest challenges. But there are a tremendous amount of South Asians there as well, a lot of them from India, in fact. Explain to us the racism that may exist when it comes to South Asians, or is that a different story?
I think anyone who, I think everyone is being tarred with the same brush, and it's highly unfortunate because many South Asians, you know, they are well educated. They're here to contribute to the National Health Service. So that's one of the biggest contributing factors they provide. They are adding to the economy, and economists always say Britain needs immigrants to help the country run, but there is this minority who feel like they've been left out of the development of Britain, and they can't find jobs, and they just see any people who are not of their ethnicity, who are in employment, as taking jobs that they could have got. So there is this dynamic where Britain desperately needs, you know, South Asians and other immigrants to help run the country, whereas there's this minority of people who might feel left out of it. and blame them for taking the jobs.
That's always been a challenge in the West, to keep the minimum wage low. They always need immigrants, they always need people. But when those immigrants land there, then that's too many immigrants. And Mandy, stay with me on this. I'll come back to you for more inputs on this story. Mandy spoke with British Indian Member of Parliament and a leading UK industrialist, Lord Karan Belemoria, on the subject. Let's listen in to what he said.
I think that what has happened as a result of what I call the wretched referendum, the hate crime and the racism is real. I personally, for 3 decades, never experienced any racism in Britain. I've received numerous amounts of racism and hate crimes, tweets, emails, letters, and people hide behind tweets. I receive letters which are openly signed with the person's name, with their address, and saying things like, you have no right to speak, you're a foreigner, you weren't born here, you and your lot, go back to India, and much worse than that.
Lord Belemoria is joining me live on phone from London. Lord Belemoria, this must be shocking for you in many, many ways.
This has been not only shocking, but to me personally, a huge disappointment because I've seen Britain evolve as a country which, when I came here as a 19-year-old student from India in the early 80s, was a country that had no respect in the world economy, was looked upon as a loser economy, a has-been country that had a colony, was a great colonial power but was now a loser, a country that had many prejudices. I was very clearly told by my family and friends when I came to England in the early 80s, if you ever decide to work after your studies, you'll never get to the top because as a foreigner there will be a glass ceiling for you. And they were right, there was a glass ceiling. But then I saw this country change in front of my eyes over the last 3 decades from being that closed loser economy and country with prejudice, to a country that has blossomed into a vibrant economy, London being the most cosmopolitan city in the world, Britain, instead of being the sick man of Europe, being the envy of Europe as an economy, and where the glass ceiling has been absolutely shattered with people from the ethnic minorities, including the Indian community, the largest diaspora and the most successful diaspora in the UK, now reaching the very top in every field you can imagine, whether it's members of Parliament in the House of Lords, House of Commons, business people, sports people, culture, media, the arts. In every area, the ethnic minorities and the Indians, the Asians are flourishing and flying. And I've gone so far as to say that I believe there'll be an Asian, an Indian as Prime Minister of the UK in my lifetime.
Well, Lord Belemoria, let me try and understand this a bit.
Last year we had the wretched referendum. And unfortunately, I'm seeing this wonderful transformation in Britain being seriously jeopardized.
Lord Belemoria, if I may interject there, can you please let us understand from your immediate, let's say around work, is that changing on a daily basis? Do you see changes happening around you where you work, where you live? What's going on?
Well, what has happened is what I was saying earlier in the earlier interview, as a result of the referendum, in the build-up to the referendum, and actually a lot is happening after the referendum as well, is there now seems to be, because of the referendum, people are being openly racist. There is hate crime. There is an anti-immigration feeling. And there is a complete lack of appreciation of migration in this country and immigration that has benefited this country. And instead, immigration is seen as a big negative. And immigration was one of the major reasons why the Brexit vote took place. And instead of seeing the good in immigration, which has benefited Britain and its culture and its economy, it's the bad part of immigration, the illegal immigration, the migration crisis that is taking place in Europe. That is the side of immigration. And the intolerance, whereas Britain had really become not only a tolerance country, it was where diversity was being celebrated. It was going beyond tolerance. And now, sadly, we've got this anti-immigration feeling. And I think it is so wrong. And I think we need to nip this in the bud because it is very, very dangerous. And it doesn't help that you have parties like UKIP that are openly anti-immigration. They are blatantly anti-immigration. And then the right wing of the Conservative Party, unfortunately, plays up to this UKIP tune And in many instances, you find the right wing of the Conservative Party going beyond UKIP. You have cabinet ministers now saying that if you're not for Brexit, you're not British. You're not for Britain. I mean, what a ridiculous statement to make, that you're linking voting for Brexit with being voting for the country, which is so wrong.
Sure. Do you worry about the future of South Asians there, and even your own family being in the UK long term? Do you think this racism is here to stay, or do you think the Britons will fight back?
I am a great believer in Britain and the British people as a country in the long term. This country has been tested to the limits. It not only survived the Second World War, not only stood up, but then in the end, with the help of the Americans, and the Allies, helped to free Europe. So Britain has been a fundamental country at the heart of Europe. It's always actually supported Europe, not only in the First World War, but in the Second World War. So Britain has been a cornerstone of the peace that has existed in Europe for over 7 decades now. And the European Union has been a big part of that. Yes, of course, NATO is as well. So I have faith that in its role, and it's respected around the world for its sense of fairness and justice. The legal system is known and respected as the fairest in the world, the most respected in the world. I don't think that this will be a lasting, because I think Britain has evolved so much over the last 3 decades. People will not put up with this sort of racism. And the anti-immigration feeling, I'm hoping the debate will come round to people actually respecting the good in immigration and realizing, for example, that even if we leave the European Union, we will still need skilled and unskilled workforce from the EU, whether it's in agriculture, the hospitality industry, City of London, in construction. We will need the 3 million plus European Union workers that live in Britain for the benefit of our economy, and we need to appreciate it, including the public services. They're not a burden on the public services. In fact, they are the backbone of the public service. In the national health and care sector alone, 130,000 people from the European Union work in it. So this debate has been completely wrong-headed and been portrayed in the wrong way.
Sure. Thank you very much, Lord Bilimoria, for joining us. You know, the whole idea of the globalized world was built on this, saying that let's create a globalized world. People, goods, services can move freely, but certainly looking backwards may not be a great idea. I also have with me on the phone line from London, Dr. Swati Dhingra, lecturer at the London School of Economics. Like most of the schools in the UK, LSE too has students from all nationalities. What's been your experience there, Swati? Do you think racism is rampant?
I think definitely we know from the statistics that racism has gone up. If you look at the police statistics on what the change in hate crimes has been, there's been about a 40% increase since the Brexit vote. So in that sense, this is somewhat of a chilling piece of information, because what it's saying is that the vote has somehow made it okay to do these things, which potentially earlier there were still feelings against immigrants, but they weren't allowed to surface the way they have now.
Swati, have there been student complaints post-Brexit?
I think a lot of my students were shattered after the Brexit vote, mainly because, of course, these are metropolitan, educated young people who tend to be much more pro-European Union than the rest of the population. But I think what really has been very, very disturbing at the LSE here, as well as other universities, is that a lot of our student and faculty pool comes from foreign countries, particularly the European Union. And that's one of the reasons you're able to attract a lot of talent, because it's a way of attracting people back from, say, the United States, from elsewhere, to let them come here and be in Europe and still be at a really world-class institution. All of that is sort of going to get jeopardized if heavy restrictions on immigration come into play, and if there's generally a sentiment against immigrants.
Do you feel uneasy, uncertain about what reaction you could get outside in public when you go out?
I think years and years of living abroad has made me quite thick-skinned, but I think there are people who've suffered much more than me. I tend to be more educated than the average immigrant, so in that sense, I don't see much of that myself, but I do see the numbers, and the numbers clearly show that there has been a sharp increase, and this is why in the future we are going to do more research on hate crimes as well.
So what you're saying is it's not really in your face, but obviously the numbers and the complaints show you that it exists and it is growing.
think what I'm saying is that I haven't experienced it personally, but I think it's not just that it's something that's hidden under the surface and it's not in your face. I think any more racism is typically not in your face. It happens through things like you never end up in the right jobs, in the right places, merely because you belong to a certain ethnicity. And that's really what's disturbing. And that sort of social immobility might get perpetuated by these anti-immigrant sentiments.
Thank you, Dr. Dhingra, for joining us for this. I'm going to go back to you, Mandy. Mandy, give us a little bit of a sense. Do you think there is angst even amongst Britons themselves saying that this is not the Britain we wanted to see?
Yes, I certainly think there's a large segment of the population. Remember, this vote was very tight. You know, it was 54 to 48, 46. It was a very, very tight vote. It split the country. Major centers of populations, London, Manchester, of course, Scotland, they all voted to remain in the EU. And so there is a lot of people saying these racist attacks don't represent us, don't represent British values, but they still go on. And it has allowed this ugly element of society to come out through the seams. And what, you know, a lot of people are hoping that there was a planned neo-Nazi march shortly after Brexit, but then there was an anti-fascist league, so pro-conduciveness, anti-fascism, who fought against those. So there are elements of society who do say this is not us, and we are a united, multicultural Britain, and this is our image going forward. But how do you fight against these racist attacks? Some have been horrific. There was one case where a Polish man was beaten to death, another case where a woman who was a different skin color, they didn't say what her ethnicity was, but she was kicked in the stomach and she lost her baby. These are horrific crimes that are happening, and they are happening post-Brexit.
It's a challenge to see the world closing in. One of the challenges, obviously, of seeing the way the 21st century is unfolding is coming from globalization, is going back to closing in and saying we are societies that we want only a particular kind of people, whether it's religious, whether it's race, or whether it's even ethnic minorities. Thank you, Mandy, for joining us and giving us perspective. January 11th is a big day for the United States. The outgoing US President Barack Obama will be giving his farewell speech. Let's listen in to some of the unforgettable excerpts from one of America's greatest orators.
Tonight, we gather to affirm the greatness of our nation. Not because of the height of our skyscrapers or the power of our military or the size of our economy. Our pride is based on a very simple premise, summed up in a declaration made over 200 years ago. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
At various stages in the campaign, some commentators have deemed me either too black or not black enough. We saw racial tensions bubble to the surface during the week before the South Carolina primary. The press has scoured every single exit poll for the latest evidence of racial polarization, not just in terms of white and black, but black and brown as well.
I'm really proud of you. And what you described.
One of the big steps the United States took was to vote in a black president. And that in itself was a big, huge departure. This time people talked about a first US president, which was going to be a woman, but it wasn't to be. But don't forget to tune in to the live, uninterrupted coverage of the outgoing US President Barack Obama's final address on Beyond Tomorrow at 7:30 a.m. That's all I have for you in this edition of Gravitas. This is me, Rohit Gandhi. Good night and good luck.